Good morning. So, hey, I am wanting to talk to you this morning about something that is totally not appropriate for kids. I know a lot of my stuff. It's totally fine if you have your kids around. Today, thank you. Not so much. So if you have your kids, pause this, watch it later, or give them something else to do. And I want to talk about something that came to my attention this morning, and I'm on the road. It's not how I would normally do a live video, but you know what? Whatever, it needs to be talked about. So this morning, my friend Julie Owens, who is a domestic violence expert and just a total hero in my book, she tagged me in a post underneath something that was written by Gail Dines. Gail Dines is Professor Emerita of Wheelock College, and she's the CEO of Culture Reframed, and she talks about some really great stuff. So if you're not following Gail Dines and Julie Owens on Facebook, you totally should be. If you like my stuff, you will love theirs. So Gail wrote this post this morning, or last night, whenever, about this ShowTime TV show called The Affair. And apparently, last night's episode ended with Anna Paquin. I don't follow that stuff enough to know how I should pronounce her name. But she's the main female character. She's having anonymous sex with a man. And in that scene, he puts his hands around her throat and strangles her. And she keeps telling him to go tighter. And then just before she's ready to black out, she says, "Stop." And Gail described it as her having this orgasmic moan, and the man, forgive my French, but the man, the aggressor in this situation, calls her one sick bitch. And that's the end of the episode, apparently. Now, some disclaimers here. I have not watched the show. I have not watched the episode. I'm not going to, because I don't put that stuff in my mind. I don't need that stuff running around in my mind. I'm not encouraging you to. I'm talking about it because some people do watch that. A lot of people do. Clearly, it's got five seasons and 46 episodes, so it keeps getting renewed all the time. And so I went and did some sleuthing. I went and did some research on it. And this is heavily on my mind right now because, not just because of what I do all the time, but because of what I've been doing this week. Last Wednesday, I was in Michigan speaking at a university that was hosting a global, because it was streamed all over the world, but a nationwide, in the United States, a nationwide summit called End It Now for ending abuse. And I was speaking at that summit. And then just yesterday, I'm in Indianapolis. That's where I'm at right now. I'm in the hotel lobby in Indianapolis, getting ready to go to the airport to get back home to my babies. But I was in Indianapolis yesterday, and I was talking and lecturing to a group of local church leaders and religious leaders about the importance of understanding the crossover of domestic violence with the faith community, and child abuse, and porn addiction, and sexual abuse, and all of these things that are happening constantly in our pews, unaddressed in the faith community. And so when Julie Owens tags me this morning on this post by Gail Dines, I'm like, you know what, I got to talk about this. This is what I'm talking to people about all the time. And so I went and did some research on this show called The Affair, because, like I said, I don't put that junk in my mind, and I don't care how much critical acclaim it gets from Hollywood. You know, there was a time 15, 20 years ago when I probably would have been like, oh, I'm gonna go check it out. I'm gonna see for myself. No, I don't need to do that. I know what smut looks like. I don't need to do that. I don't need to have it floating around in my head where I can't get rid of the memories. But here's what that ShowTime says on their website. It's deeply intriguing and elusive show about an extramarital relationship. Now get this. One of the things we teach is the spectrum of abuse, and that if someone has power over another one, whether that power comes from an extreme age gap or position, social influence, whatever those things are, that creates a dynamic of abuse because it's an unequal relationship between people who are not peers, where someone has much power over the other one. So I'm thinking through this filter, this lens, as I'm reading ShowTime's notes on the description of the show. The man is a teacher and a novelist, so that means he's he's got fame, and he's got influence, right? He's been married for 20 years. He's got a 20-year marriage, and he has 4 kids. And he's having an affair with a girl who is a young waitress and wife. And it doesn't specify what, but it says she's trying to pick up the pieces after a significant tragedy in her life. So she's emotionally vulnerable. She's emotionally easy to be exploited. She's looking for comfort. And he clearly is willing to leverage his power and influence and charisma and whatever else, I'm ad-libbing here because I haven't seen the show, like I said, over her. Now, if I were looking at that as an abuse recovery coach, I would be saying, okay, let's say this guy's a pastor, a teacher, he's got 20 years on her, he's got influence, he's published, he's a pillar in the community, he's established, she's young, she's vulnerable, she's weak and wounded, and needs comfort, and he comes in and there's an extramarital affair going on here. These are not equals. This is an abuse situation, even if you don't get to the sexual deviance of whatever else. So in this whole thing, the scene that Gail Dines was discussing in her post was the young woman, the waitress wife, having anonymous sex, it sounds like with someone else. But the whole point is the glamorization of non-fatal strangulation and violence in sex. And you guys, we cannot ignore the fact that our culture has normalized horrific levels of violence against women as okay, as the starting point in sexual relationships, including in marriage. And I'm talking about, obviously Hollywood doesn't care much about marriage, so they're talking about sexual relationships across the board. But I want to just throw out some things that you need to know. Because you can sit there and you can watch that stuff and you can say, oh, well, that's just TV. They're just doing that on the show. It doesn't happen like that in real life. But you know what? Yes, it does. You see, I have a friend who is an instructor at the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. His name's Officer Brian Bennett. And he and I have talked a lot about his articles that have gone nationwide on the dangers of non-fatal strangulation. Did you know that when a man is willing to put his hands on a woman's neck for any reason, whether that's in anger, during sex, whatever else, she has a 750% higher risk of being murdered by that man. 750% increased risk of death at his hands. Breath play in sex is not a funny thing. It's not an okay thing. It's not like everybody has their choice. I mean, yes, I suppose everybody does have their choice, but you know what? It is not okay. It is not acceptable, and it should never be normalized. We are dealing with unprecedented pornification of mainstream culture. And one of the things that is so horrifying is the number of children who are exposed in today's society to hardcore, violent, rape-oriented porn at younger and younger ages. The average age now is something like 7-8 years old. And this is long years, decades before children have the emotional maturity and the life experience and the brain development to be able to say, that's not normal. That's unhealthy. That's violent. That goes against all common sense and safety. And instead, when children are exposed to this stuff early on, it becomes their normal. It becomes their education. It becomes what they choose to expect. They believe that that's what people do. And then how can we complain when they try to act it out on other people? When this generation grows up, this kind of porn will have been their sex ed from 1st and 2nd grade onward, unless you choose to do something about it, unless you choose to drastically protect your children. unless you choose to stand up and speak out and have tough conversations with your kids. Because you know what? That kind of pornification isn't just in porn anymore. It's on mainstream TV shows. Yesterday, while I was lecturing at the group of church leaders, faith community leaders, about the dangers of domestic violence and the issues in the faith community with abuse, one of the leaders came up to me and asked me, he says, look, we've got all kinds of situations. We live in a flawed and broken world, he says. We've got people with pride issues, we've got people with substance addiction issues, we got all of these things. He says, why do you believe that sexual dysfunction is sometimes, it seems to be so much bigger, so much more pervasive than all of these other issues? Why is it everywhere? And so I said, well, Pastor Jones, I believe that it is because that the sexual dysfunction that we see is directly inverse to the incredible amount of beauty God created sex to be known with, sex to be had. So let me rephrase that. I believe that God initially created sexuality to be something so beautiful, so perfect, so sacred, so unifying, and so much a reflection in humanity of what it is like to be at one with God, to reflect his relationship with his church and the bliss that comes with that. I believe that God created it to be so powerful that our culture has been perverted, and I don't mean just like, oh, such a pervert. I mean inverted, transformed inside out to create dysfunction that is as pervasive in inverse to the level of beauty and powerful and unity, power and oneness and an incredible sacredness that God created holy sexuality to have. So as powerful as God created it to be, that's how much dysfunction the devil has twisted it and turned it into. And I also believe that we have gone about sex education in the faith community in all the wrong ways. Now, I'm a big, huge fan of saving sexuality for marriage. I absolutely support a biblical worldview on sexuality, but not looking at all the ways people in the Bible perverted sexuality either. I'm talking about God's creation of sexuality as a gift for humanity within marriage. So what I'm trying to say is that I believe in the faith community, we've gone about sexual education from a perspective of don't do this, avoid that, don't get caught, don't do this, don't get pregnant, don't get a disease, don't do this, don't do that. Oh, and by the way, save it for marriage. And you know, honestly, most married people don't look like they're having much fun in their marriage anyway, so why would I want to save it for marriage, right? And instead, we should be approaching sexuality as this is the most amazing thing, the most beautiful thing. This is holy, it's incredible, it is phenomenal, it's ecstatic, it's designed to be a mind-blowing experience. It's all of these incredible and amazing things, and it's meant to be that way on purpose. It was created for that purpose, and the best way to experience that is inside a loving, safe, intimate, committed relationship between equals with another healthy person. So that instead of saying, this is what you're supposed to avoid, we say, no, the best sex is inside a marriage. It's where two people love and trust and protect and look out for each other, where they serve each other and are kind to each other. And there is so much love and affection, because the happiest people, they're the ones who are married, they're the ones who are having all the sex, they're the ones who are having all of the intimacy. And I'm not saying that, don't anybody derail me here and say that I'm saying singles are less less valuable or anything. I'm strictly talking about sex inside of marriage, not the value of singles versus married people. So don't derail me on that. But if our married couples lived like their sexuality is an incredibly beautiful and holy and fulfilling and happy part of their lives, instead of just being kind of bored and dead with each other, and if we talked to our young people about what God created sex to be from a holy and beautiful point of view, we could turn this around, at least for the young people who will listen. And you know what? Honestly, it's not just the young people who need that message. It's the middle-aged people in my circles. It's the older people. It's all of us, because we have all been immersed in a pornified culture, in mainstream perversions of sex, in an environment that is totally accepting and even promoting of abusive relationships, abusive music, abusive movies, abusive TV shows, case in point. And it sneaks into our mindset more than we know. So I want to challenge you to take a step back and evaluate what you're putting in your mind. If your music, TV shows, video games, movies, if all of that stuff that you're putting in your mind, if you are passively or even actively consuming pornified mainstream culture, take a step back and look at that. Is that what you're bringing into your home? Is that what you're deciding is okay for your kids to glance at? Are you really aware of what your kids are looking at and watching on their devices? Because the place that this stops is in our homes, friends. It isn't going to stop with the world out there. It's going to stop only when we start a ripple effect inside the families that God has already given us. I'm going to go get on a plane, and I hope you have a really great day.